CEO of UID Management. Shout out to my business partner here, Sandra. And my background is, I like to describe myself as a walking contradiction. I am originally Nigerian, and I grew up as a son of a diplomat, so growing up in 5 countries and 4 continents, I was the minority everywhere I went to. So as a 10-year-old, with a very strong Nigerian accent in an American international school in a French-speaking country, the need to be seen and the ability to make yourself feel comfortable amongst all these differences was something I became intimate with at a very young age. And the older I grew, the more I saw the deep contrast a lot of companies were expressing to a lot of these sentiments. And much like these 2 young ladies here, it's a deep concern of mine. And as someone that sort of looks the way I look like as well, it's it's something that I hope to see change. You know, research does show diversity and inclusion is important. Research shows that people with more women and people with different diverse backgrounds affect and disrupt what groupthink could operate. But my goal has always been to change the way leadership is operated or run things, and to build the next set of global leaders. So for me, it's a personal mission as well as an office and professional mission. So it's something that I started since I was 10 and continuing way up now. And I hope that you all will continue to extend that in your organizations. So there you go.
Thank you. And I guess to also introduce myself, I'm Ananda. I'm one of the co-organizers of the Agentech Showcase, but also one of the co-founders of Day 100, which is a recruiting technology platform that helps companies understand their talent better and hire better. And by understand their talent better, I mean not just look at a resume and draw conclusions about who someone is based on a piece of paper, but the ability to really know someone holistically, what they're really like as a person, that I believe really touches on removing bias and diversity and inclusion. So allowing people to leverage technology to get to know people at a deeper level and at scale. So yeah, I'm super excited to have all of you here to discuss this topic. And I guess initially I'd like to maybe begin it with like in a way, like a very oversimplified question, but maybe one turn out that way, and just kind of define what do we mean when we talk about diversity, and what does this word mean to you, and maybe what do people typically think about diversity, and you're kind of want to change the frame of that conversation and either broaden the scope or clarify, or what do people misunderstand about it, and how do we first of all define it in a way that is right and you believe captures all of the different aspects of it. Hopefully that makes sense as a question.
To oversimplify and oversimplification, diversity and inclusion is thoughtfulness and belonging in and of itself. If you are thoughtful and ensuring that someone feels like they can bring their entire selves to work, you have succeeded. If you are creating an environment where that cannot occur, you have failed. We've all seen the statistics. We know why diversity is important. The issue continues to get paid lip service because it is something that essentially is not changing, which inherently means that there is something broken in the conversation. But it is ultimately impacting how people are looking at tech, how individuals are able to be retained in tech spaces, and how seriously people, both internally and externally, take their employment in these spaces as well.
To me, diversity is simply differences, right? The differences in ideas, differences in people, differences in races, thought, leadership, and all that kind of stuff. And inclusion is how you leverage all these differences in the places. And I think the mistake a lot of people have made with diversity is thinking that it means only one thing. But the beauty of the word diversity is that there are many, many things coming together at once. And I think the mindset that needs to actually be used and utilized when we're thinking about having this discussion is the idea of being open-minded to a very different opinion than you're used to. And the idea of actually sitting down and not being, not prejudging or going into an environment saying, I already know what I'm going to do, and basically going there and saying, I'm going to do that. And there is a lot of lip service. There is a lot of people touting excuses like, the pipeline doesn't reflect this, but the idea of making an environment where people feel safe enough and okay enough to be themselves is the whole idea of what diversity and inclusion is. That's my definition.
It's really interesting. I think just having this panel makes it so clear that there's such a broad view about what this topic even means. So I support everything that Jennifer and Tayo said, especially around the idea of inclusion. When I think of diversity, I think of it really broadly. So I saw Life Labs do a presentation, and they had a slide that was really impactful to me, where they had an iceberg. And on the tip of the iceberg, you could see the different ways that people were diverse. So, you know, sort of, we can look around this room and see that people are different ages and different colors, and maybe there's representations of different religions. But that's really only the tip of the iceberg. And then under that iceberg is so much more that you could never know about that person, right? So I would never know that Tayo was from Nigeria. He's lived in a lot of different countries, and so he brings a very diverse perspective that I wouldn't know just by looking at him. So I think of diversity really broadly, and I think that having people with all these different perspectives is really important. And that's when I think of diversity, I think of it very broadly.
I just want to add one point, and she brought up a great point, because I often get confused as African American, but I'm an African living in America. But the difference is, but that's the idea when people make an assumption of, oh, you fit that diverse category, or you look this way, you must be that way. So it's going beyond skin deep, right? It's getting inside here and understanding, okay, this is what I'm bringing to the table. It's not grouping a lot of Latinos as Mexicans, and understanding that a lot of Latinos have different, subcultures within that. And even within a country, within a group of people, there are subcultures within that. So we need to get beyond a lazy set of thinking where we say, oh, it's black, it's white, it's this, and understand that there is no monolith in any group, and there is so much more. And that commitment to doing that, I think, is what it is. And I know you probably didn't need to go this way, but yeah.
Great, yeah. I mean, this already highlighted the diversity of diversity in a sense, right? I mean, we're not talking, I think when people think of diversity, maybe they immediately think of gender diversity or racial diversity, but there's so many more, and you already touched on those. Age and thought diversity and ethnicity, and I think I spoke with someone here who was also talking with, or working with people, where are you? Working with people that, like ex-convicts, right? And even that is a different kind of diversity. So all these subgroups, and all of them need to be thought of differently. And when we think of diversity, we can just think of us versus others, but you have to really get into all those shades and colors, and not figuratively speaking. But anyway. Yeah, so I mean, everyone already hinted at all the studies that have been done that show that diversity matters and we should care about it. Even in hard numbers, there are studies that say that, for example, companies or when teams are made of, are split between men and women, 50-50, those teams perform 41% better in terms of revenue. And there's other statistics that when it comes to recruiting, for example, it shows that about 70% of the candidates do consider diversity as a big element of whether they want to work with a company or not. So there's all these figures that do point, and as old as 2014, so it's not even, it's a 2017 topic, it's been around for a while. People have been talking about it for a while, so I guess my question is, why are we still here talking about it, and why hasn't enough change happened yet? Like, where do you see the roadblocks, and what is that people are, even people with good intentions are not getting about it, and why isn't it getting done? Jennifer, go.
Spoiler alert, because I actually speak about this in my presentation, but the reason why we're continuing to talk about it is because it's more fun to talk about it than it is to fix the problem. Sorry, but it is. There's something to be said about actually doing the work, and I'm putting work in quotes because the individuals exist. The equality exists. There are very nimble, extraordinarily intellectually curious, mindful, hardworking, engaging, qualified individuals that can very easily fix the problem, and they're available. People aren't looking for them, people aren't engaging in them, and quite honestly, it's more fun to talk around having a problem than it actually is to fix it. Because once it's fixed, what do you do?
It's basically a lot of lip service, but the idea of what diversity and inclusion is actually real work. And a lot of people, in my experience at least, when you talk to them about diversity, they acknowledge it. Yes, we don't have a diverse workforce, but when they start getting into those conversations, they realize the conversations are much more difficult than they anticipated, and then they push back, or it might be a reflection of something they're not comfortable admitting to themselves. But we can never get anywhere as a society. You look back at history, whether you go into the Nelson Mandela and apartheid or anything, if you're not willing to push through those difficult discussions. It's understanding that this is going to be an investment, and much like a treat investments, you have to wait for a while to get that dividend. And you can't just put a Band-Aid on it and say, gosh, I acknowledged it, I look good in this papers, and that's it. But if you treat it as a dividend, and whenever your investments are, Dell does well this month and they drop down there, not everyone's going to rush to take the stock out. They're going to be like, I'm going to ride this out. That's how we have to approach that, because of course there will be some anger from a group of people that have not been included in the conversation for years. That's a normal human interaction. But to counteract that with, I talked, you were aggressive, I'm done, is not progressive. Because if you're looking at the future is going to look more diverse than it is now, and you're not doing yourself any service, and you're only going to be part of the problem. So it's what a lot of what Jennifer said, is you have to be willing to do the work, and you have to be willing to have thick skin to deal with the uncomfortable truths that you may realize by yourself or the society around you.
I feel like this question is so much bigger than I am. The real question of how, it's almost a big societal question. How do you, it starts from getting the right people, the right education at the right points in their lives so that there's the right pipeline for the high level positions. It's for each, I think it's hard to group all of the different diverse groups in a way that makes it an easy question to answer, right? It's, for just taking a few examples, right? It's, if you want to think about age diversity in tech companies, there's very, very different challenges to that population than there would be to racially diverse categories, to women in technology. So I just feel like it's really big and multifaceted, and I think that from my perspective as just one person who does what I do, I think the best that I can do is to make people really aware that this is an issue, make people aware of things like unconscious bias, a lot of the things that we're going to be talking about today around diversity and inclusion, and try to chip away and make changes. But the why is, I think the why is because it's such a big, hairy issue. Sorry.
I'm gonna add to that. I also think that part of the issue is that the conversation around diversity and inclusion is one that's reactionary. Last Sunday, with the post from the young lady that said strike, it was an Uber. 2 weeks prior, another Uber issue. 3 weeks before that, another Uber issue. Not Uber's a problem. But there are always conversations that are happening in this vacuum of, oh crap, we messed up. And there's only so much runway you have when you're trying to be reactionary and fix a problem because someone just called you out on it. Rarely does it go positively. Usually diversity and inclusion doesn't live in a land where there wasn't an issue or a challenge that needs to be fixed, and needs to be fixed in a very loud way. Oh look, we have X problem. Let's fix it as loudly as possible.
Great. So yeah, I mean, I'd love to move away a bit from lip service and then get as actionable as possible. So, I mean, I guess the question is, how do you diagnose that you have a problem before something like the Uber situation blows up? And can you be proactive about it? And how can you actively build a culture that is diverse and inclusive? And let's get specific, what is maybe one tool or one advice that you'd give to people that are here, a lot of whom work as HR leaders in their companies, to go back to their organizations, start implementing or thinking about starting tomorrow?
I'm going to mention this in the presentation, but one way to be proactive about this is actually being intentional. Your employer brand, all your commercials, everything, you've got to reflect this. I mean, I've seen so many commercials or people represent themselves in print and all that, and it's definitely not the type of audience they want to attract. But that's an awareness that you have to have. So having that ability to say, hey, we want you to come here and have people represent that. Another way is to, if you say there's a pipeline shortage, then start younger, right? If you say go to the high school. If you say there's a pipeline shortage, go to the Latino club, the Asian club, the African American club. Actually build relationships with these people and say, all right, we understand that maybe the stats will wane as you get to college, but we want to be intentional about this relationship with you and get X amount of people here. So you're starting with that diverse slate of people as you are hiring. You know, I mean, there are things in place in the NFL, like the Rooney Rule, which is still not sure it works. But anyways, the Rooney Rule, where you know you have the X amount of people that can get hired here. But it's you have to have those conversations from the top, from the board level, the presidential level, for anything to filter down there. Because a lot of the people down in the subordinate levels, they know what's happening. It's them that's experiencing it. So if you want to change the conversation, I think everybody in leadership positions, if you look at themselves in the mirror, play some Michael Jackson, and then just say, look, what are we doing? You know, are we actually saying, we're saying this a lot, but are our policies reflecting that? So it starts with marketing and starts all the way down.
Change starts when people stop being sorry. There are far too many conversations that I have with individuals who are in the tech space that begin every conversation with, I'm sorry that we haven't hired more women, haven't hired more minorities, haven't worked harder to engage, and so on, and so on, and so on. Stop being sorry. Because essentially what happens when you engage in that line of thought is that you are putting yourself front and center in a situation that has very little to do with you. So I also talk about this in my presentation as well. There need to be more allies and less apologies. If you are actively engaged in the art of HR, and especially because HR has become decidedly more strategic, ensuring that you give a level amount of runway to impact your managers, your employees, and ensure that they know that they actually play a bigger role than even they themselves understand is ultimately important. But again, I look like this, I've looked like this for a really long time. So I've gotten a level amount of apologies, and apologies don't change anything. But they do stand to dampen the entire conversation around action. And they make inaction something that is standard.
What's really important is that we're largely, I think, in this room, a group of HR professionals, and we've just taken it for granted that diversity is important and it's an important business driver. And I think until your senior leadership really understands it and believes it and buys into it, and it becomes a business imperative and initiative, that it's just an HR requirement, so people feel like they're just checking a box. So I think for the what do you do when you leave the room next step, it's making sure that leadership and management is bought in to this being important. And I've worked in places where that is the case, and I've worked in places where it's not the case. So I think it's really important that we don't take it as a given that everyone believes what we believe. And then I think the second step is taking action. So whether it's really typical stuff, it starts really basic. Trainings on unconscious bias, so people really are understanding how they're making decisions that they might not even realize they're making. And maybe it's having diverse slates, so you're at least getting diverse folks in to interview for every role, right? So there's a bunch of basics, but I think the first is getting the buy-in at the top.
Great, so another question, and maybe this is the last one for now, and then we'll come back after the presentation, since a lot of you have hinted at them and are like, this isn't my presentation. So we'll get to those in a second, but I did want to bring up right now technology, because this is the HR Tech Showcase after all. So how can technology help in this, and also how do you manage it to help properly? For example, Trello is an organization that uses Slack and have their dedicated diversity and inclusion channel. They're where they encourage people to talk openly about it. But then the other kind of question mark that comes to my head is, how do you balance creating that kind of space with also not trying to police it or make it, making the company in a way infringe potentially on people's privacies and on personal conversations potentially. So how do you balance like monitoring it, using tech to monitor the conversation versus get too specific or personal? You look very confused. Do you see what I'm trying to say? Okay, yeah. Alarm bells here. Yeah, but I guess technology, how do we use it properly, and how do we not misuse it? Because there's all these risks with that could be attached to it.
Personally, being as it may that I believe that the gain would far outweigh the risk, I would err on the side of not being cautious. There are certainly different applications. I'm blanking on the name of it, but a young woman of color created a platform so that people can look at other people's CVs and resumes, much in the way where most of the names are removed, but most of the information that has nothing to do with the work that they've done is redacted. And it is all in a very user-friendly slate, so their skills shine, not where they went, not where they got the skills, but the skills themselves. And I'm going to remember that name shortly, because it has one, and it's good. I'm sure it has a name. But ultimately, I'm saddened to say it, but there is still very much a thought in the minds of many that technology doesn't belong to everyone. And I think that thought in and of itself is part and parcel, part of the issue here. If you don't see yourself reflected in the places that are responsible for innovation, you don't feel like you're invited to the party. And so you're less likely to actually use them or feel like they're for you. You might use them, but they might not be for you. So I'm specifically thinking Twitter, Black Twitter. Yes, it is Twitter, but it is a completely different subset that makes a personhood that is seen as a subculture now becoming a main thing. Creating those spaces so that those subcultures can shine, again, because Black Twitter is now a thing. And Twitter is also a thing, but them being a thing and them being in conversation are extraordinarily important. So allowing the technology itself to exist, to potentially have something go wrong, is more important than ensuring that people are safe, so to speak. And that is so not HR to say. But I'd rather there be the opportunity for people to use technology and things to go carefully wrong than the technology not to be utilized at all.
I think this conversation a lot of times starts with the idea of people being honest about the future of work. People talk about work a lot of times, and there's not enough conversation about the idea that technology is advancing work in the sense that there are going to be many virtual workplaces. We're going to be doing business across different people, different backgrounds, and a lot of us talk about work like it's something that happened 50 years ago. The technology we have is something that's going to advance us here and cause a lot of stuff to be automated, but no one educates that at an early level. And that education doesn't reach people of diverse backgrounds because you're not already hiring people from diverse backgrounds. So that's why these things go hand in hand. Is if you start making sure that you make it part of a market business issue, you hire people and you understand how that affects your bottom line, but then you also start educating people from the orientation, and then you don't just stop at orientation. You say, hey, this is how Slack can help you. This is how Twitter can help you. This is how Trello app actually does this. People are more aware of this, and it just becomes inherently part of the company culture. So I think all these things go hand in hand. I don't think they should be siloed, and I think a lot of times it just creates the idea that only a group of people understand what technology does, and it's not that. So, I mean, that's my answer. I'm trying to simplify it. That's what I have to say.
I think that technology is a great way to bring together people who otherwise wouldn't have known each other or crossed paths. So before the internet, really. I think there was a lot more meeting people and dating and socializing with people in your circles who you met at your clubs or your schools. So I just think generally the use of technology, Slack in companies and other ways that people can connect is just a good way to bring together people.
Cool, so speaking of technology, the Twitter handle is up there and the hashtag, so if you have any questions in mind, please tweet them and you'll also have the chance later to ask them. And I do see some of you are like with your heads down or your phone, so I hope that's what you're already doing. You're not texting. Just calling out everyone. Cool, well let's get to the presentations.